soil dweller. Aaron Porter sat with his back resting against the latticed metal wall of a pedestrian overbridge on a hot summer evening. Far above in the azure sky, raucous seagulls circled on rising thermals in search of roosts on the rooftops of Crowmorton. On Wednesdays, Aaron liked to sit out his grandfather's flat cap on the railway footbridge. There was less likelihood of receiving a kicking from binge drinkers or crackheads midweek. He lived in fear somebody might decide to set him on fire or throw him off the bridge. Possibilities best avoided. The next day's newspaper might run a small article about a young homeless man dying in a mindless act of random violence. Good people would shake their heads and be disgusted between mouthfuls of cornflakes, and equally shocked by the latest celebrity gossip. The same good people who were on the footbridge that summer evening. He could not make eye contact with them, and hated himself for how they made him feel. He sat, cross-legged, staring at the loose change in his granddad's cap. Money he had placed there himself as a hint to its purpose. Beneath him, a serpentine freight train clanked by on its way through Crowmorton's railway station. The well-heeled returning from the town's restaurants, clubs, and theaters passed by in groups, heading for the station platforms. Most did not acknowledge his existence except to give him a wide berth. In times of recession, people who had money were less likely to be generous with it, or so it seemed to Aaron. He turned to hear the tinny announcement echoing up from the station for the imminent arrival at Platform 1 of the 10:25 local passenger service. He decided it was time to pack up. There was a bed for the night at a church community center if he could be there by 11 p.m. The vicar of St. Michael's allowed him to sleep in the back of the building and act as unofficial caretaker, but was strict about punctuality, and Aaron had nowhere else to go for that night. Turning back to scoop up the cap, Aaron saw a crisp 20-pound note inside. He looked around for the source of this generous donation and saw a young woman walking away from him. "Thanks. Thank you, miss." His voice croaked, uncertain. For a moment he thought she had not heard him, but she turned and smiled. He recognized her. Emily, the vicar's daughter. "Hey, wait up!" he called after her. Aaron prickled with embarrassment. A pretty girl smiling at him was almost too much for him to deal with. Flustered, he folded the note and placed it in the breast pocket of his old army jacket. He tipped the coins out of the cap and placed it on his head. The coins went into a small leather drawstring pouch hung around his neck. The 10:25 passed beneath the bridge in a rush of squealing brakes and updrafts of warm air. Aaron stood, shaking the stiffness from his legs. He hardly dared look up to see if the young woman had waited. He breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that she stood watching him. He jogged up to her, and together they walked down the steps. At the bottom, they turned left onto the old sidings path, leaving the noisy station behind. "It's Emily, isn't it? That was very kind of you back there. Can I walk you back to the vicarage?" Emily looked very modern and confident, in a spiky kind of way. Aaron's heart thumped in his chest. When she began to laugh, he almost bolted back toward the bridge. "Are you for real homeless? You talk old, like my dad." I had a sheltered upbringing." He could think of no easier way to describe his difficult childhood. She shrugged, seemingly happy with his short explanation. "Well?" Emily said. "Well, what?" "You're a deep one, aren't you, homeless? Well, are you going to walk me home, then?" It was Aaron's turn to smile. He gestured toward the path, and they set off side by side. Although the railway still owned the land, it no longer had a use for it. The shunting engines, their wagons, and the tracks they ran on went to scrap metal long ago. The area had become home to silver birch and blackthorn, rats and foxes. The narrow gravel path cut through a flat, boggy landscape, disappearing into an intermittent green tunnel. The sun was setting, draining light from the sky. Deep black shadows pooled beneath the overhanging trees. Ranks of tall, stinging nettles crowded the verges. Empty beer cans littered the ground, and plastic bags of decaying dog turds hung from thorny branches. Clouds of agitated gnats filled the damp, earthy air. "How old are you, homeless?" "I'm 23, and my name is Aaron." "I know. I hear my dad talk." How comfortable is it sleeping on a mattress at the center?
It's okay, thanks.
I'm 18, by the way, in case you're interested, Emily said. She walked a little faster. Aaron could not help but notice the way her hips swayed. He did not dare ask why she thought he might be interested.
Hey, wait up! I'm tired. Think I better grab the center keys from your father and get an early night.
Please yourself, homeless, but I've got the keys, she said over her shoulder, and broke into a run.
Oh, crap, said Aaron.
He could hear Emily giggling. As she ran, her silhouette moved in and out of shadow. He realized he was on dangerous ground. The vicar's daughter had plans for him. God, maybe the 20 pounds had been a sweetener. Payment in advance. He hung back, hesitant. He did not know how best to deal with the situation. Up ahead, he heard Emily's voice calling his name.
Oh, Aaron, come and get it.
You know you want to. He hoped she meant the key. He expected to be sleeping alone on a shabby mattress in a community center storeroom, but now it seemed as though Emily wanted to join him. The vicar had been kind enough to offer him refuge. He could hardly repay the man by having sex with his teenage daughter. Aaron knew how spiteful girls that age could be if they did not get what they wanted. He thought it probably best if he cut his losses. He turned around and began his trek back to the railway station. Maybe he should use some of the money to buy a ticket to another town. He began to walk a little faster, but stopped. The evening had grown late and dark. What was he thinking? He should see Emily safely back to the vicarage. At first, he thought the scream he heard might have been a fox. They sometimes sounded all too human. He slowed his pace, listening intently. There it was again, only this time he was certain it was Emily screaming. He turned around and started to run. It was darker beneath the overhanging trees, the inky black shadows almost solid enough to bar his way.
Emily, I'm coming!
Wild thoughts flittered through his mind as his feet pounded gravel. Perhaps the girl was playing games to get his attention, or maybe she had fallen, twisted her ankle in the dark. Maybe there was somebody else on the path. A rapist, perhaps. Aaron stumbled to a halt, gasping for breath, the stabbing pain of a stitch in his side, as he concentrated on his surroundings. Twigs snapped as something stumbled through the undergrowth off to his left. He could not hear Emily. No sounds of protest or struggle, not even a whimper.
Hey, what's going on? I'm calling the police!
The threat sounded hollow, even to Aaron. He did not own a mobile phone. He plunged through vicious strands of blackthorn, shielding his eyes from their skewer-like barbs. They jabbed his exposed head. Roots caught at his boots, threatened to trip him up, but he persisted until finally he reached a clearing. Full dark threatened to blind him, but there was still enough light to see what had happened to Emily. She lay on her back among the filth and debris of a junkie's den littered with tinfoil, crumpled cider bottles, and syringes. The whole place stank of earthy decay. The silhouette of a man straddled her stomach with his back to Aaron. The man was naked. That realization shocked Aaron more than any other aspect of the scene. Sane people wore clothes. That was all he could think as he stepped closer, until he got a better look and decided that there was something wrong with the man's skin. The stranger's flesh seemed to be moving. The man gripped Emily's throat with a hand that glistened and writhed in the dying light like maggot-filled meat. Her eyes bulged. They settled upon Aaron's face and pleaded with him to intervene. He broke eye contact and scanned the ground for a weapon. His desperate gaze settled upon a 3-foot length of wood with rusty 6-inch nails jutting through one end. He picked it up and raised it over his head.
Get the fuck off her now, you bastard! Get off, or I'll smash your fucking skull to bits!
Aaron's voice shook with rage. The hand on the girl's throat tightened. Her eyes rolled back in her head.
Bastard!
Aaron swung the length of wood as hard as he could. Bizarrely, an image of him as a boy on the school's rounders field entered his mind. He saw his 12-year-old self swinging a metallic red bat and connect with a leather ball. A satisfying crack echoed around the field. The momentum of his swing unbalanced him. It met no resistance, no satisfying crack. Something wet and sticky spattered his face as he staggered forward, trying to maintain his stance. He felt something moving on his chin. He plucked the wriggling thing from his face and stared at it. A worm. He turned his attention back to the figure hunched over the girl. Oh, Jesus Christ! He had taken the man's head off with one blow. Then, as he watched, a column of worms stretched blindly up from the headless neck and began to weave a new head with their glistening red bodies. What the fuck? Aaron gasped in disbelief. He held the length of wood out before him. Gurgling sounds came from the girl as she convulsed beneath her tormentor. The thing crouched over Emily was not a man at all. It was something else, a monster, something beyond any reality Aaron could accept. He raised the wood above his head and went to work. After the third blow landed in the pulpy mess, Aaron's makeshift weapon struck fast. Try as he might, he could not pry it free from the sticky, swirling mass of worms. A foul-smelling liquid oozed from the body of the agitated mess, like sweat from a rotting corpse. He lost his grip on his makeshift weapon, felt it slide out of his hand. A jagged splinter pierced the palm of his left hand and drove deep into the flesh, forcing its way back out between the knuckles of his first and second fingers. He looked as if he'd grown another finger, bright with blood, and yet to grow a layer of skin. He saw the shaft of wood disappearing, sucked into the red worm torso, saw it spat back out straight at his face. The pain was immediate, blinding. The wood bouncing off his forehead sounded like somebody popping a cork from a champagne bottle. There was even a cartoon-like pause before his legs collapsed. Aaron viewed the world from the ground, like an overturned camera set on record. He could not move. The worms busied themselves reforming the battered torso and head once more. It sounded like an old man with no teeth eating spaghetti. Tears mingled with blood and snot on Aaron's face as the monster raised its new head to the darkening sky. Its worm hands pushed Emily's torn skirt up over her pale thighs, parted her legs, and lowered itself down on top of her body. One word whispered from Aaron's lips. Why? As it entered the dying girl, the creature turned its head toward him, the mouth parted in a hideous grin. Because I can, the reedy voice hissed, like air escaping from a punctured tire. Emily arched her back beneath the monster. The monstrosity seemed to melt away as more of itself flowed into its victim. Her belly expanded like a gas-filled balloon. Her mouth stretched wide in agony. She began to cough, a wet bronchial hacking, and sprayed fountains of blood and knotted clumps of wriggling worms into the air. The worms flowed from her mouth. They ate voraciously. Blood, hair, skin, and bone, even her clothing, disappeared into the ground, leaving nothing but a damp, wet patch of freshly turned earth, where the last of the worms plowed their blind bodies back into the soil. The world had become an even more frightening place for Aaron. He managed to roll over onto his back. Tears blurred his view of the stars in the sky. Emily, he whispered her name. One moment she had been flirting with him. The next, a monster made of worms had choked the life from her, invaded her, eaten her from the inside out. Now she was gone. He could tell no one. Who would believe him? They would suspect him of being involved. He had no choice but to walk away, try to forget what he had seen, and keep the monster's secret. The glistening red hand burst from the damp soil, gripped Aaron's throat like a vice, and crushed his windpipe, as if it were a ripe marrow. A face with writhing worm lips rose from the ground and began sucking on Aaron's ear. I keep my own secrets, whispered the monster as it chewed on Aaron's flesh.